Hey-o, what's going on, buddy? Hey now.
Welcome to the new year of IoT Nuggets, Doug.
It's 2023, and the IoT space is moving along on the bleeding edge of what's happening in the world. And,
Yep.
you know, Steve.
And if everybody out there in IoT Nugget land think that 2023 is going to bring a higher level of maturity for Doug and I in IoT Nuggets, you'd be wrong.
You would be wrong. And if you have any comments on that, leave them in the comments.
That's right. That's right. Exactly.
Whether it's on LinkedIn or YouTube, you can follow us and connect with BHIoT Group on all of those things. And you can go back and look at prior nuggets where we discuss what's going on in the IoT space. And having said that, we have a great guest today to kick off the new year, Mr. Joseph Radecki. And he comes to us from KPMG Corporate Finance. It's kpmgcorporatefinance.com. And Joseph is the managing director, investment banking for the group head for technology, media, and telecom. So welcome, Mr. Radecki.
Thank you, Doug. It's a mouthful, isn't it, that title?
It is.
But he's a professional, so he did it really well.
That's right. Yeah, hey, the longer the title, the more important you are as well.
Wow. Yeah. My wife reminds me that's not the case. So.
You need someone to keep you in check. So, all right. So, hey, let's pass it off. I'm going to allow Steve to dig into it with you, sir, and talk a little bit about your company and what's going on. Take it away.
Excellent. Thanks, Doug. Joseph, it's been a long time trying to get you on this show, so I appreciate you taking the time to do it.
Well, I appreciate your flexibility and patience, Steve. I've been eager to be part of this for a long time, as you know. I've been a fan of IoT Nuggets, having watched most of them at this point, I think. And I'm humbled and honored to be here with you.
Awesome. Well, we had a great kickoff to the year at CES with a great show. I don't know about you, but I was very impressed with a lot of the new products that are coming out around IoT and some of the companies that are bringing some really cool things to light. But why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what your group is doing and what your expertise is in?
Sure. Thanks. Appreciate that, Steve. And listen, with regard to CES, I couldn't agree more. You were kind enough to sit down with us for a bit there, along with some other friends, and very impressed by both the new class, if you will, of innovators that were there, as well as the momentum in the space that we're hearing from the big strategic players who are leading the way. So Steve, as you know, I sit as the head of the technology, media, and telecom investment banking team at the firm. We are a middle market focused M&A advisory firm that sits within KPMG, the large global financial services and accounting firm. Our clients tend to be companies with enterprise value between 50 and 500 million. We have built a very specific sub-vertical focus in IoT over the last 6 or 7 years, to a point today where I'm confident in saying we are the most active M&A advisor in IoT, having closed over 22 transactions in the last 6.5 years. And that includes finding the right owner for smaller companies in the space, as well as working with very large global platforms who are either looking to advance their product set in IoT or possibly catch up to the market in IoT. These are large industrial technology companies, large software platforms that we've advised. We've also done a couple of carve-outs in the space from large corporates. So this is a space we're very active in, continue to be really excited about, and frankly, think we're in the top of the second inning with regard to the strategic activity that's going to happen around AI, IoT, hyperconnectivity, however you want to refer to the space.
And do you? So, I had a conversation with a company yesterday, looking for money on the open market, worried about the economics of where we are today in the world, and I had to take them off the ledge and basically say, IoT over the last 34 years that this young man has been in it has always been resistant to the economic challenges of our time. Are you guys seeing the same thing? Is the activity that you're expecting in 23 pretty high?
Yeah, listen, I think it's interesting. Coming out of CES, I had at least 4 conversations with companies who either had just closed a round, one of them that morning, Friday morning, and or were about to close a round, and not one of them was talking about a down round, right? A couple of them were flat rounds, but the others were significantly up rounds. What we're seeing in the market right now, Steve, and this is not just with regard to IoT, but really any technology that has a great deal of momentum, there's still mountains of capital chasing quality ideas. I would suggest that investors have become more pragmatic, a bit more circumspect, maybe spending more time on diligence than they may have done a year ago, 18 months ago. But there is still capital available for companies that have a differentiated technology set, have a feature set that's garnering them new logos, new customers that are building momentum. I think one of the biggest shifts we're seeing with regard to growth equity, so I'm not talking about Series A, but growth equity, is a year and a half ago, investors may have been willing to look at something that was still significantly EBITDA negative as long as it was growing at 40, 50, 60%. I think that has backed off a bit. I think now we're seeing investors who are saying, look, I'm not going to fund tens of millions of dollars in EBITDA loss, even though they've got the growth. I need EBITDA break even. So we're seeing a bit of a shift in terms of the key attributes that are going to be successful in raising growth equity capital. But there's still a lot of money out there. On the M&A side, Steve, honestly, we think the volume momentum in the space will continue. 22 was a record year in terms of number of transactions in IoT. The aggregate value of those transactions was off from 22. It's because there were a number of very large deals done in 21. Aggregate value was off from 21 in 22. But volumes were significantly up. Based on what we're seeing right now, and we're in market right now with a really interesting IoT platform that is growing significantly, is EBITDA break even, and we're getting a really strong response from both large strategic and private equity. Again, I think there's a lot of capital chasing quality ideas. Deals are going to take a little bit longer. Buyers are going to be a little bit more.
Yeah, I bet.
But they're still running at the quality stuff.
So Joseph, are you obviously from a multiple standpoint? If I'm an IoT company coming out with really cool disruptive technology, and I'm definitely on the leading edge of things, hardware, software, recurring revenue, is that where we're still at? Is that still what turns you guys on as far as seeing transactions happen?
Yeah, so I think it's a great way to pose a good question. So from a multiple standpoint, if the platform is pure as a service, true recurring revenue, multi-year subscription-based contracts, those are still happening in a strong revenue multiple range. We are seeing and are part of transactions that are still in the double digits of revenue multiple.
Wow.
Now, there are also platforms that are showing really strong hardware and software as a service, or as we call it, software and hardware as a service, or SaaS. As long as the hardware is folded into the contract and is part of that recurring revenue subscription payment, those are seeing very strong revenue multiples.
Wow. So finding the capital to be able to bury it into the overall program.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the challenge, is you have to fund the hardware coming into that contract, right? Now, that's not to say that companies that are in the space with software and hardware, where they're selling the hardware alongside of a SaaS contract, those are going to get strong revenues on the SaaS piece and hardware revenues on the hardware piece. It's going to be a sum of parts kind of approach to value.
Yeah. It's obviously something that you and I talk about ad nauseum. I mean, you and I could probably talk for, and we have talked for hours about some of this stuff, because what you're seeing is you're in the middle of some amazing transactions in an industry that's expanding rapidly. And I think that anybody who is even considering an M&A scenario or in need of an IB needs to go talk to Joseph and the team. Joseph and I just did what do we call it? A white paper? What did we just release today?
Today it hit hot off the press is the our annual M&A year in review for IoT. This is a newsletter we do every year that goes back and looks at all of the transaction volume across IoT. And from it, we can gather who's active as an acquirer, where are multiples today, what is the volume, how is the momentum in the space, and that hit the news wires today. This one was in a particular joy for me because our featured article was an interview with an IoT industry expert named Steve Brummer. So yeah, imagine that. Yeah.
Does he even know about it?
I can't imagine how he agreed to do this with us, and our ability to get him. It was a huge win for us to get him to be part.
It only cost you breakfast. That was it.
Yes,
not bad.
But let's know we always get a great response to this piece, and not only are we highlighting an interview that Steve kindly did with us, but we also take a deep dive into AIoT in healthcare. So there's a couple pages on what we're seeing there. So
awesome. All right. So how do people get a hold of you, Joseph?
Please feel free to email me at jradecki@kpmg.com. Go to our website that Doug was kind enough to refer to earlier, or ping Steve. And Steve has me on speed dial. So and I'll answer the call when Steve calls.
You did.
Yes.
So, all right, Joseph, thank you so much for joining us. This was awesome. I knew it would be, and so we really appreciate your time.
It's my pleasure entirely, and I hope I earned the right to come back someday.
Doug and I will talk.
You think about it. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it very much.
All right, Doug. What do you think?
Yeah, we never make those decisions on the spot. We have to deliberate a little bit. But
that's right.
I mean, great stuff, Joseph. And the whole part about anybody who can hitch themselves to the Steve Brummer bandwagon is going to be in good shape.
Stop it.
But I also, just from my standpoint, it's good to hear someone in your position talk about the momentum that is still there in the space, and that there's still capital available for companies who are innovators and coming up with new technologies. And with all the volatility that's been going on in the world in the last couple of years, that's still refreshing to hear, I think, from my standpoint. So I think this was another great edition of IoT Nuggets. We really appreciate you joining us, as Steve said. And for those watching, if you have an IoT deployment that you want to talk about, or some expertise that you think would be good for the show, reach out, let us know. We're always looking for guests. And bhiotgroup.com is the website. And we will see you all soon on the next edition of IoT Nuggets.
You got it. Thank you.
Thanks, gentlemen.
Cheers.